For months, there have been delays and cancellations. For too many, and not just on strike days. It's long journeys, a seat if you're lucky, and late to work again.
I am a commuter myself from Slough to Leeds. Every time I get on a train, someone tells me a story about how this is impacting on their lives.
In Leeds, we're with the Mayor of West Yorkshire, heading to a long called for meeting between Northern Mayors and the Transport Secretary.
It's utter chaos. Today, 60 were cancelled. We've had cancellation after cancellation, delays, trains that were supposed to be there, not there. People's lives have been severely impacted.
60 cancellations in one day, just by TransPennine Express, is not unusual of late. Add to that, there's the West Coast, run by Avanti, which roughly translates as forward in Italian. Only in the summer, staffing problems meant 3 trains an hour became 1. Next month's new timetables are meant to mean more trains and faster journeys, but there are fears it could just mean a repeat of the infamous timetable chaos of 2018.
I do believe we are going to see catastrophic disruption across the north. It is really, really worrying. And if it was happening in London, there would be marching in the street because this is just not acceptable.
While we're still on the train, in the Commons, the Prime Minister was facing questions on the same theme from his own benches.
Can the Prime Minister tell my constituents what the government's going to do to sort this out and get the West Coast service back to what it used to be, because the service at the moment is completely unacceptable?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right about the unacceptable deterioration in the quality of Avanti's service. The Transport Secretary is rightly monitoring and holding them to account. There is a plan to increase the number of trains to 100 additional drivers, Mr. Speaker, and restoring the full direct service between Manchester and London.
Mr. Harper, Channel 4 News. Were you on the train today?
Yes, I was.
It wasn't cancelled then?
No, it wasn't.
Even Tory MPs are now saying you need to do something about the situation. What will you do, Mr. Harper?
Yes, I am. Well, it's partly why I'm here to talk to the mayors about what we are doing to deal with the problem.
A few moments later, he was joined by the mayors, minus one, who didn't make it. What with the trains? Their meeting, according to the Transport Secretary, was constructive, if not all that long, over more quickly than their journeys to get here.
It's 10 years since George Osborne came to Manchester and promised us all a very different railway with much better infrastructure, much better services. Here we stand today, 10 years on, and the railways have gone backwards in that time. And so it's clear the government's got a choice here. Is it finally going to deliver on those promises? Is it going to prioritise railways in the north of England? It's obviously their choice.
In those 10 years, the rail promises to the north have been added to, with the commitment to level up. But the context and the decision makers have clearly changed. Well, there is actually a kind of basic agreement here between many, from the Prime Minister to the Transport Secretary to the Labour mayors who met today, that this is not OK and it needs to change. We can't continue with this level of disruption to so many people, even the train companies who've been criticised, TransPennine and Avanti. They've said that this is a situation that is totally unacceptable and they are sorry. But they also point out that it's not caused by any one thing. There are lots of different factors at play here. One of the big ones that the mayors want solving is the absence of an agreement on staff working their rest days. But if you're looking at the stats and thinking it doesn't seem all that bad, bear in mind every day there are dozens of cancellations that don't officially count as cancellations, and that's one of the big problems here.
Thanks very much, Claire. Well, Oliver Coppard, who's Mayor of South Yorkshire, was at those talks with the Transport Secretary. He joins me now, and given everything, we're delighted you've made it. What was the meeting like?
I'd describe it as constructive and positive in tone. It was good that the Transport Secretary came to Manchester to talk to us, Northern mayors, representing 9 million people across the north. But a conversation in an office block in Manchester is one thing. Actually getting on and delivering those changes to the railways, transport services more broadly in the north is a completely different thing. And so we want to see concrete action and steps taken immediately to increase and improve services across the north.
I mean, Claire makes a very good point. The Transport Secretary says he's under no illusion there's a real problem. You heard the Prime Minister say it's unacceptable. The question is, what are they going to do about it? What can you all do about it?
Well, look, there weren't any concrete actions that have come out of the meeting that I can point to and say this is going to improve services for people travelling on the trains tomorrow. But what we did get was a commitment from the Transport Secretary to look seriously at things like rest day working on the railways, to look again at things like the Leeds area study that we've been waiting on for over a year now, which will see whether or not we can increase services between Sheffield and Leeds, and a host of other issues besides. So what we hope is that the Transport Secretary has heard us when we say this simply isn't good enough.
But you see, people have been saying for a very long time things are not good enough. Anyone who has travelled in the north, across the north, knows how difficult it can be. What could the government do right now that would change things?
Well, you're absolutely right. Too long, and we're at the end of essentially 12 years of austerity and changes that have seen transport services get worse, not better. And that follows George Osborne's commitment to make services in the north world class. We've also got a government that have said levelling up means by 2030 we will have a London-style transport system, and we can't face another lost decade. So, frankly, keeping those promises is what the government can do, and immediately what that means is getting around the table with the trade unions and fixing the problems there so we don't face
this
the strike action and a host of other issues besides. It means unlocking some of the investment in the north that we're waiting on, not least, as I say, the investment between Leeds and Sheffield. And then it also means that actually what we need to do is get on and look again at how we deliver these services through franchises like TP, Pennine Express and Avanti, and seeing whether or not they should hold those franchises.
Because I mean, would you like them to take away the franchises from some of these companies?
As the Mayor of South Yorkshire, I have no confidence whatsoever, particularly in Pennine Express. They deliver or don't deliver train services east-west across South Yorkshire over to Manchester, for instance, and yet 30% of services on any given week are cancelled. Now, that simply isn't acceptable. I went over to Manchester the day before my meeting just to make sure I could be there, and I know people are making decisions every day about what meetings they take, the jobs they go to, college, schools, seeing friends and family, based on services that will or won't appear depending on what time of day it is.
But isn't there an argument that if you change the franchises, if you take them away and start all over again, you are committing to more disruption?
Well, look, yes, of course there is, but we're not asking for a failed system to be replaced by another failed system. We're asking for those services that aren't working to be replaced by a system that does, and that's the government's responsibility to get on and deliver a working rail system. I don't think that should be beyond us.
Oliver Coppard, thanks very much for coming in.